Welcome to The Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with an in-depth coverage of the latest events across the world economy and the financial markets. Today we'll look into what lies ahead for Kenya as it recuperates from the recent terrorist attack. First, the headlines. In the U.S., the partial shutdown of the government enters its second day. As lawmakers stiffen their positions on the budget, it seems likely the standoff will emerge with the dispute over raising the U.S. debt ceiling. More on this story following the headlines. At Microsoft, 3 of the top 20 investors are lobbying the board to press Bill Gates to step down as chairman. The investors collectively hold more than 5% of company stock and believe Gates would block new strategies and limit the new CEO's power. Gates, who co-founded Microsoft 38 years ago, sells 80 million shares a year under a preset plan that would leave him with no financial stake by 2018. He lowered his profile at Microsoft after he handed the CEO role to Steve Ballmer in 2000 to focus on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Pharmaceutical giant Merck & Co. plans to slash its 81,000-strong workforce by 20% over the next 2 years. With the aim of saving $2.5 billion a year, Merck also plans to close offices in New Jersey and discontinue some late-stage drug development. Merck is one of several big health companies in the U.S. to cut R&D and sharpen its research focus. And in Rome, the Vatican Bank published its financial accounts for the first time in its 126-year history. The Vatican Bank's 2012 net income more than quadrupled to 86.6 million euros thanks to trading in fixed income securities, including government bonds. The bank's 2013 performance will likely be lower due to the cost of opening the secretive and scandal-plagued financial institution to greater accountability. Kenya is one of Africa's richest countries, boasting a marked increase in growth in recent years. But following the terrorist attack in Nairobi, the long-term effect on tourism, the country's second largest sector, remains unclear. More in this report by N24 News reporter Daniel Roth.
Over 3 days of violence and nearly 70 are dead. The terrorist attack on the Westgate shopping center in Nairobi was a frightening event that may also hit Kenya's economy. The recent events took place at a time when Kenya was just starting to find calmer waters after a period of political and economic crisis. Its GDP went from 1.5% growth in 2008 to more than 4% in 2012, and the government still expects double-digit growth for 2018. Currently, Kenya's GDP sits at approximately $976 US per capita, with a population of about 42 million. The attack is likely to have an impact on tourism, which is the second largest sector of the East African nation's economy, generating about 830 million euro in the Kenyan economy last year. However, tourists are still there. They're just a little more cautious than before.
I was a little skeptical coming into it all, but so far we haven't seen any effects of anything. Of course, we haven't been in the middle of a city where everything happened. We're kind of staying away from that.
But tourism is not the only variable at risk in Kenya's economic landscape. Foreign investors may decide to review their plans as Kenya issues its first bonds in international markets in November. If foreign investors aren't confident in Kenya's economy and believe that it's a fragile place to invest, they won't.
Although Westgate was a shot across everyone's bows, it does not change the Eurobond issuance calendar. It does not change the premium that investors are willing to would require to lend money to Kenya. So I think on balance it's coming. I think Westgate doesn't stop it, and I think there will be very, very strong demand for that Eurobond.
And according to the Minister of Finance, the fundamentals of the economy remain strong and healthy, and the 5.5 to 6% growth target remains on track for 2013.
Joining us in the studio now is Eli Avidar, president of the Israel-Africa Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Avidar, how did the recent terrorist attack affect the business sentiment in Kenya?
I believe that maybe there will be some concerns in the beginning, but I don't see that it will have a long-term effect on of the Kenya economy, especially because this country is quite impressive in its development, and I believe that the business potential in Kenya is much greater than any threat that can be possessed in this time.
Okay. I mean, Africa in general is not really mentioned so much in economic news, but by many it's seen as the place where the middle class is growing and where the future really lies. Can you say something more in terms of that?
Absolutely. I must disagree because I believe that the continent of Africa is the #1 destination for investments worldwide in the last 10 years. And I believe that the business community in Africa is changing dramatically. First of all, there are a few elements that made Africa as more impressive. First of all, the rule of law. And you can take Kenya or Angola or any other countries, Ghana especially, or Ethiopia. The rule of law is changing dramatically in the last 10 years, and it makes...
As to say, there's a lot less corruption.
I would say definitely less corruption, but also governance. It is about good governance, and I believe that those countries, we are speaking about 54 countries, but many of them are very impressive in their potential. Okay. But about investments in Africa, we have to take into consideration a few elements. First of all, that right now we are 7 billion people on the planet, and in 2050 we will be 10 billion people. We will have 3 more billion people. They will need food, they will need resources, they will need water, they will need agriculture, and I believe...
And technology, obviously. You know, there's this whole plan to put Wi-Fi over the entire continent. What would you say about that?
Absolutely. First of all, there is a lot of development, especially from what we see from the Chamber of Commerce in the issue of communication and about internet. It's quite impressive because Africa exceeded all the expectations about getting into the modern age technology. But if we return back to Kenya, because I believe that we should speak about it a little bit, I don't think that the last attack will have an impact, especially because this is not a specific problem for Kenya. This is an attack by international terrorism that wanted to generate coverage and media to a very minor and unimportant group of terrorists in Somalia. And I do believe that we have to look at Somalia because most of the people in Somalia are not supporting this school of thought, and especially Islam is much, much more moderate in Africa in general and in Somalia specifically.
So in general, we don't have to worry about tourism being affected, or for that matter, the economy or business sentiment?
We always have to be worried about terrorism attacking, and international terrorism will have an effect. But about the economy, I don't think that it will have a major effect because the business potential is much greater from the concern that it can generate.
I see. Thank you very much, Mr. Avidar, for those comments. Thank you. The U.S. government has shut down, and about 1 million non-critical workers have been sent home without pay until further notice. But as the mid-October deadline for a decision on the debt ceiling rapidly approaches, a lot more could be at stake. Reporter Steve Katz joins us on the phone now for a personal report from Washington, D.C. Mr. Katz, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you very much for joining us. So what is the mood like in the District of Columbia? Is there a sense that the dispute might be resolved anytime soon?
Well, initially, if you ask the rank and file, certainly on Capitol Hill, most people thought this couldn't go on too long. It's so unpopular. A big indicator of that is the polling. The polling, which is just came out yesterday, shows that although the Democrats aren't particularly scoring high points, it's the Republicans that are receiving the higher dissatisfaction right now. Going by Washington, D.C., driving by the Jefferson Memorial or the White House or the Washington Monuments, it's a pretty strange feeling on a bright day like today to see all these national landmarks empty and closed. So it certainly gives one for plenty of room for thought. The bigger issue right now is how long will the shutdown last, obviously, but also it looks like it could realistically and possibly go into the 17th when the debt ceiling crisis.
Right. Exactly. What are the main concerns if it's not resolved? How will this affect America, for that matter, the world?
Well, let's hope it doesn't get to that. But I can tell you if it does, it's a big, big issue because it's something that America has never faced before. It's come close. It's come to the 11th hour. But America's always paid its bill. So the prospect of October 17th coming and America not being able to pay its debt is going to be a major crisis if it happens for not only the United States, but everywhere, including there in Israel. There's a good chance the United States could lose much more of its ranking and filing in terms of its credit score, banking, you name it, anything associated with financial trades. The president met yesterday with some key financial institutions, the CEOs, for instance, Chase, to discuss what could be done. We're not privy to what was discussed exactly in terms of the outcome of those meetings, but you can bet it's specifically along the lines of what to do next. It's a very difficult situation. As late as last night, the Republicans said, quote unquote, they're willing to negotiate. But then the other side is, the Democrats are saying, what is there to negotiate? One stickling point that seemed like a possibility that might still happen is both sides seem not too happy with this medical device tax that was passed in 2010 as part of the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare that everybody refers to. And it was a 2.3% tax on medical devices that are sold. It's a very small amount, but there possibly might be some room there for some type of compromise. But again, that's very iffy at this point.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Katz. We're joined now by Daniel Roth, our own I-24 News reporter, who has some news about this from the international media.
Yeah, so one of the things that's notable about the story coming into day two is the different ways in which the media is covering the shutdown. So Slate magazine has this really, really interesting report on it that they actually did just before the shutdown was official, where they take a look at how the U.S. media might report on the similar situation in another country. So they are talking about two warring clans in the central city, and they're using this kind of language, talking about that that actually America can't come to grips with the international standards for healthcare, which the Affordable Care Act is below those standards. Actually, if you look at what it's providing, but it's a step in the right direction. They're talking. So this article is really digging into the issue as if it were, say, a country in the Middle East or in Africa, and kind of looking at the way the American media glosses over the internal politics of those places, and really paints a picture of that isn't quite right. Obviously. Right. Another interesting look was from Politico, which, unlike most of the media I've been looking at, they've been covering it, or at least they covered it, as kind of the GOP stopped Obamacare from coming in. Not that there's a government shutdown, not that services are put on hold, but they stopped this oppressive legislation.
Wow.
Which is interesting. And then The Onion, the fake newspaper, had a wonderful congressman walking through hallways talking about stuff.
What kind of stuff?
The hilarious part of the report was they weren't talking really about anything. The only thing known was Ted Cruz was walking with nobody.
I see.
Gotcha. And so some from around the world, you get also a different perspective. The Jerusalem Post is reporting as if it's two equal parties, and there is something to negotiate about. Steve Katz was saying the Democrats are saying there's nothing really to negotiate about, and whereas this Reuters report in the Post is saying these are two equal concerns, and they just got to find some way to compromise.
Basically, like viewing it from a more democratic perspective, saying like this is the ultimate democracy because these parties are just butting heads and trying to get to a solution.
Right.
Is it a little optimistic, you think?
Yeah, well, the rest of the world media, especially from the rest of the English-speaking world, is really seeing this as a group of immature people acting like babies when they really should be taking care of 300 million people. That's kind of the sense you get. You see like the BBC reporting on NASA is getting shut down right now because their funding is put on hold because they're non-essential. The Guardian is talking about the 400 national parks, and
it seems really unfair to call it non-essential. Maybe it should be called non-critical.
Well, so another article in Slate actually noted that the requests for freedom of information, which is something journalists engage in a lot, are put on hold right now because those are non-essential. However, the organizations that they're requesting information from, for example, the NSA, those are essential. So while you can't get information about what the NSA is doing, the NSA is still doing what it's doing, which is spying on Americans, as we learned in the last few months. So it's interesting to see what's considered essential versus non-essential, and it points to the values at work in the American government. So the Irish Times is looking at it a little more the way the American media generally is looking at it, which is that there's an act, the Affordable Care Act, and it's a law, and the Republicans don't like it, and they're acting like babies, and it's put almost 1 million people out of work, and it's stopped numerous services that, as we just spoke about, are actually essential, but they're deemed non-essential.
Okay. Wow, well, there's probably a whole lot more we can find in the international media about what they think about the shutdown, but we're going to have to shut down this edition. Thank you very much for joining us. Please continue to send us your comments via our website and check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and check us out again tomorrow.